I am from the UK and I now live in Western Australia in Perth. We moved here about 13 years ago. I got two kids who are 12 and 14. I love Australia. It's taken a really long time for it to feel like home, but I would say that finally really do feel like Australia is home to me.
Fantastic. As a fellow expat from the same town, we're both from Manchester, aren't we? Like
We
where it
are.
always rains.
It always rains. I tell you what, Janet, I went home at Christmas and I hadn't had a UK winter for 15 years.
Oh,
And oh my goodness, it rained every day, every single day. I think we were very unlucky. I think it was like the wettest winter on record or something. I was hoping that we were going to have these beautiful blue skies and it was going to snow and my kids were going to see snow for the first time. But no, it was just puddles and mud and non-stop grey, miserable raining. The typical Manchester winter, right?
let's dive into the drinking story, shall we, Sarah? Where did it all start? Were you a teenage drinker in Manchester like me?
Absolutely, absolutely. So I was 14 when I started drinking. But I would say I'd probably had bits of alcohol here and there before that. I grew up in a family where alcohol was very present. There was always lots of parties, like dinner parties, and my dad drank a fair amount. My mum drank every now and then, but would always get quite pissed. And I had a grandmother who lived in the south of France, and most days she started drinking at 10 in the morning. So for me, growing up, alcohol was very present. As a little girl, I would drink the top of my dad's beer, and that would be thought of as being hilarious. So for me, it was a case of not if, but when. I can remember the first time I got pissed with a group of friends, just loving it. What I loved about it was I had just moved the year before from Scotland, where I'd been born, to Manchester. In Edinburgh, I'd gone to just a local comprehensive that there was no uniform, a little bit rough around the edges, and just a normal high school. And then we moved to Manchester to an area where they had the grammar school systems. So I had to take an exam. I passed by the skin of my teeth. But as a result of that, I ended up in this very middle class, all girls school with this really strict uniform and girls that were playing hockey and netball at the weekend. And I was hanging out with people that were smoking fags and shooting up in the toilets probably. And so it was a real contrast. And I had this really strong Scottish accent, this terrible perm. I was a bit overweight. I had terrible spots. And I did not feel like I fitted in at all. And even looking back then, I can remember that tenseness in my tummy every day going to school. Just how was I going to get people to like me? How was I going to be able to fit in? Then I remember the first time getting drunk with a group of girls, and it was like, oh, you're my best friend. I love you. You know, those walls come down when you drink. And for me, it was like, that's how I get to feel accepted. That's how I get people to like me. Then I started to get feedback of, oh, you're hilarious when you're drunk. You're so much fun when you're drunk. So there for me was this very strong story. People like me when I drink. That's how I get to fit in. That's how I get to make friends.
Yeah.
And that was all I wanted, right?
So it became your identity.
That was
Yeah.
what became of me. And then you think about the ways in the UK, especially, all those rites of passage growing up, they're all just alcohol fueled. I moved away from home, went to uni, and it was just 3 years of constant drinking. I then moved to London. I got a job in recruitment, and the fourth round of interview was doing shots of tequila in the pub to see how well I could handle my booze.
That's shocking.
I know. This was the 90s, right? So that was just normal. I worked in a recruitment company. It was brilliant. It was like an extension of university. So there was about 200 graduates. We had these managers that were a bit like teachers. And when they left the room, there'd be fights and people would be chucking paper across the room. And we had Champagne Friday, every Friday, where the booze would come out. We would smoke at our desks. We would drink champagne. It was just prolific, the drinking culture back then. This was the time that we started getting these role models, particularly in the UK, the ladette culture. There was Sex and the City, where these incredibly glamorous women were drinking cocktails, picking up blokes, going to all these rooftop bars, and women can have it all. It was the Spice Girls, it was girl power. It was just this era where we can match the guys pint for pint. We're making our own money. We can do exactly what we want. By this point, I was a very seasoned drinker. I held my booze incredibly well. Some of my friends would have a big night out, and the next day they'd lie on the sofa hungover drinking Diet Coke and going, oh my God, I'm never drinking again. That wasn't me. I was like, oh, when are we going to go for hair of the dog? It really surprised me. I couldn't understand why these other people didn't want to go back to the pub the next day.
They were just
Dreadful.
lightweights, obviously.
Yeah, I was just like, what's wrong with them? But I would always find someone to go to the pub with the next
I
day.
bet.
There's always someone.
But when I look back now on that ladette culture and Sex in the City, we felt so liberated, didn't we? Like we can be
So
just
liberated.
like the guys. But it makes me so angry now because all that is big alcohol using the feminist movement to sell us booze, isn't it? Because we can't drink like men. Of course, we have to be equal with career opportunities and salaries, etc. But we can't drink like a man can drink. We're just going to hurt ourselves. So that's pretty annoying, the way that big alcohol used that feminist movement just to sell us more of their bloody toxic product.
Exactly. And I don't think any of us needed telling twice that I deserved it. I guess this was the time of the Alco Pops coming out and the drinks that were more palatable to women. And so this was how we could drink as much as the guys. Obviously, we didn't want to drink beer as much. And so there was all these Smirnoff Ice and Moscow Mule and all of those drinks that were more palatable that we would drink.
And all the wine bars. Era. We didn't have to go to grubby pubs anymore. We could go to these glamorous wine bars with our girlfriends and drink many bottles of wine. And it felt great.
Yeah. And like you say, it felt liberating. That was exactly how it felt at that time. For me, I think that when I noticed it started to change was after I'd met my husband and we'd got married and we'd had a baby and then had another baby very quickly after and had made the move to Australia. All of a sudden, there was this huge shift in my life where I was a mum of 2 very young children. I'd moved to the other side of the world. I didn't have any family. I didn't have any girlfriends. I didn't have a job. At this point, I was a director of a firm. I had a very successful career. I'd been making my own money. It was still recruitment. There was lots of bonuses. There were weekends in New York. There was fancy pants restaurants and everything. And all of a sudden, I was in this house where I was pureeing potatoes and carrot, and I was cleaning up baby sick, and I was taking the kids to monkey music. I was so lost, Janet. I was so confused because on paper, I had everything that I'd always wanted. I was so blessed. I had 2 beautiful, healthy children. I'd got the boy and the girl, which I'd wanted. I was living in Australia by the beach, which I'd always dreamed of doing. We were in a financial position where I could take some time off work and my husband could go to work. Yeah, I was so sad and I was so homesick and I was so confused about why I was struggling so much because I thought I should be feeling better. Then I started to look forward to the evening drink because that was the thing that made all those feelings go away. And that was what I knew. I knew that was Sarah, the fun Sarah. That was who I was. Of course, going back to what I'd learned as a kid, that's how you make friends. You go and get pissed with people and then they like you. And I'd been really struggling to find a friendship group because Perth can be quite a difficult place to integrate yourself. We deliberately didn't go to the expat area where all the Brits live. So we went to the area where a lot of locals live, but of course they all have their friends and they'd all gone to school with their friends and had their own communities. And there's this English girl coming up trying to immerse herself in local life. It was a really hard time. I was struggling and I would go home and I would get the kids to bed or sometimes start drinking just before they were in bed, or I'd wait for my husband to get home. I was just looking forward to alcohol in a way that I hadn't before. It was like, I need a drink.
And you were using it as a coping mechanism. It wasn't about the fun anymore, was it? It was about
exactly
numbing the loneliness and that lost feeling that I can understand so well.
It wasn't that it was showing up in any problematic way. I was still functioning. But looking back, I can see a piece of me just started dying. I'm quite a driven, go-getting, passionate person.
I can see that.
I lost my drive. I lost my spark. By this point, the kids were at school. and I had set up my own recruitment business. So it meant I was working from home. I didn't have any team. I didn't have colleagues. I could do what I wanted, which probably fed my drinking as well, because I had no one to answer to. I had no reason that I couldn't be pissed on a Monday night because there was nothing that I had to worry about on a Tuesday. But I am a people person, and I was just on my own all day at home. I would have days where I'd drop the kids at school and I would go home and I would climb back into bed and I would just play Candy Crush on my phone all day until it was time to pick them up again. For some people, that might sound like bliss, but to a go-getting, driven, passionate woman, if that's the best you can do on a day, it starts to eat away at you. It starts to really play on your conscience. The self-talk just became pretty bad.
How long did that phase go on, Sarah?
Years.
Years, wow.
Years.
Did you realise that alcohol wasn't the answer and you needed to change, or you were just in total denial?
Absolute denial. Because I didn't drink every day. And this is what kept me stuck for so long. I didn't drink on Mondays and Tuesdays. So therefore, society tells you you've only got a problem with alcohol if you drink every day and you drink in the morning. And I didn't do that. So therefore, I was like, I don't have a problem. I was at the point where every time I did drink, alcohol was causing me to wake up at 2 or 3 in the morning.
Yeah.
So my way of getting over that was to take a sleeping tablet every night along with whatever I was drinking. So most nights I would have a bottle of wine or more plus a sleeping tablet. That's not going to do anything to create any more drive or energy, is it? That just rots your soul even more. So that was happening. Plus the anxiety was really starting to increase. I went to my GP. I was like, I'm a mess. I'm a shell of myself. I can't stop crying. At no point did she say, how much are you drinking? Happily gave me a prescription for anti-anxiety meds and just said, oh, you're just a bit homesick. Just take these and it will make you feel a little bit better. Then I had 2 things happen that for me were just incidents that, looking back, were the beginning of change. One was I'd gone to a party and I was very drunk and I was smoking a cigarette and I crouched down to put it out, but because I was so pissed, I had no reflexes and I toppled forwards, but I didn't put my hands out, so I landed on my face on a concrete driveway. And I, cut my nose open, cut my lip open, luckily didn't knock my teeth out. I got taken home and put to bed. And I woke up the next morning to my 5-year-old daughter standing by the bed saying, Mummy, what happened to your face? And you know that moment where you just, that sinking, sick feeling in your tummy. I was so ashamed and I was so disgusted. And I went to the pharmacy and I was like, I've got to get this cleaned up as quickly as possible. I can't carry on with my face like this. So she gave me all sorts of arnica and ibuprofen and stuff. Then as I was walking out, she slipped me a card for a domestic violence helpline.
Oh, bless.
I think I looked like I'd been beaten up, right?
Yeah.
And that
alcohol does beat us up, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Wow.
So I decided to take a 21-day detox. I was like, I need to just have a break. I went too far. I drank too much. That was really embarrassing. I need to take a break. So I intended to do 21 days and I kept going. This was 2017, so there wasn't the tools and resources. There weren't all the programs and everything that there is now. I think I read Annie Grace's book, and that was like my first introduction to actually considering that alcohol was anything but this wonderful thing that we had in our life. I remember lying in bed and I was reading bits to my husband and I was like, wow, did you know that alcohol does this? I honestly had no idea. No idea whatsoever.
We're so naive, aren't we?
So naive. And so I kept going and noticed such a change. The anxiety disappeared. My sleep improved. I lost weight. I was so motivated at work. I made more money in that 100 days than I'd made the entire year the year before, because I was like getting on the phone and doing the calls, doing all my work, because I wasn't just lying in bed playing Candy Crush.
So interesting. I've just finished this podcast on workplace drinking in Australia. One of the things that they say in the workplace talks is that for an executive, and they've got case studies to prove it, when they stop drinking, they become 30% more effective. Your
Totally.
story underlines that again. Because even if
Totally.
alcohol doesn't destroy us, it stops us reaching our potential in life.
It absolutely does. It stops
Yeah.
us reaching our potential. It's not even just the alcohol. When you think about what are the pillars that support us to show up as the best version of ourselves, right? It's okay, sleep. Alcohol destroys our sleep. Usually we're not exercising as much if we're drinking. Are we getting good nutrition and nutrients? Alcohol messes with our gut microbiome and causes leaky gut. It's not just the impact of alcohol on its own, it's the impact of alcohol on all of the other aspects as well.
Yeah, that's such a good way of looking at it. Those pillars of good health, and they crumble if we drink too much.
Yeah, exactly.
Can I just ask you about your husband? You mentioned him a couple of times. I wondered if he was a drinker and what his attitude to all this was.
So he was a drinker, a big drinker like me. And so we enabled each other. And that was our way of connection. That was what we did together on a Sunday, especially. It was Sunday night drinks, was me and him, and we would drink together. I think we had this unwritten rule that we never questioned the other one's drinking, because if I questioned him, he could question me. So we just never did, ever. Even if there were nights when he was really bad, I would never say anything. And the nights when I was really bad, he would never say anything.
Ooh,
And
that's
so
dangerous, isn't it? It's the elephant in the room.
Yeah. I do remember there being one comment from him around my 40th, where I think I was on my 6th night in a row of pretty big drinking sessions. I'd had different friends coming to stay from all over the world and stuff. He was like, "You're drinking again?" And I was like, "Yeah, what's your problem?" And then he just didn't say anything because I was very defensive. And that's probably the only time he's ever questioned me, because he was in his own issues with alcohol as well. So we were both just in denial. And
has he quit as well?
So he stopped for 3 years when I stopped. Then he made the decision to go back to drinking. I was like, "You do you." What I did was take lots of breaks, go back and try to moderate and not be able to.
Yeah.
Then, whereas he just one day had a massive bender. He'd never taken a break from alcohol ever. And this bender was a really bad one. And he just stopped for 3 years. He'd never dabbled with, can I moderate? He was just that person that went, that's it. So after 3 years, he was like, "I never intended to stop forever. I'm going to see how it goes." It was really interesting, Janet, because he used to always talk about this mate that would sit on his shoulder and would just be like, "Go on, have another drink. You deserve it." When he started drinking, he had no off switch. He said the very first time he picked up a beer, after 3 years, that little mate that had been gone for 3 years just immediately returned with that little voice, and which is what we know to be true. So he trialed moderation for a while and then just went, "Nah, my life's better without it." So he stopped again last year.
Good for him. Good for him. So talk us through how you did it and those first few months of sobriety.
So after that first break, I'd gone back to drinking, thinking I'd be able to moderate, couldn't moderate, and then had 2 years. And that 2 years was probably critical in my journey to me successfully stopping for good. It was part of my journey, because in that 2 years, I learned some really important information. I learned how good I felt without alcohol and how many things in my life were better when alcohol wasn't present. I learned I can't moderate, and moderation is actually never going to be an option for me. I learned that when I drink, it really does cause so many problems internally. On the outside, no one would have thought it was an issue, but it was the way it made me feel. It was the self-talk. It was all of those things that were just so awful. So by the time I set the date when I'm going to stop, I think I was so ready. And I'd done a couple of 100 days before, so I was prepared. I knew what to expect. I knew the highs and lows that were coming. I knew about the sugar cravings and all the stuff that was likely to happen. I knew I needed a goal, so I set myself a goal of a half marathon so that I had something else to focus on, and that massively helped me, because we know how good exercise makes us feel. It was like a reason to be getting up at 5:30 in the morning, which was another reason not to be drinking at night. The endorphins, the outside, like all of those things really helped as well. I threw myself into the sober community, connection with others. And I just really focused on everything I was gaining and not what I was missing.
Yeah. Because we gain so much more than we lose, don't we? And I
Yeah.
think that's what we don't realize when we're drinkers, because we think, oh, I'm going to lose my friends. I'm going to lose my ability to have fun, to relax. But in fact, we gain so much more, don't we? We find ourselves again, and we feel better and we look better, and everything changes. But it takes a bit of time to realize all that.
Mm.
If you had to pick out your top 3 benefits of alcohol-free lifestyle, what would you choose? I know there's so many.
The connection to self that I have now, I just didn't know myself. I thought I was this person that
Yeah.
actually I'm not. I'm so grateful that I've actually been able to go on a journey of meeting my true authentic self,
Yeah.
because if I carried on drinking, I never would have met her. And
Yeah, we lose ourselves, don't we?
how sad it is that so many people live their entire life
Yeah. Yeah.
never truly meeting that authentic person that they really are.
Yeah.
So that's been huge for me. And it's been work. I've done therapy, I've done all sorts, and it's not always pretty. There's been a lot of emotions along the way, but that has been incredible. The role modeling that I can now do to my kids,
Yeah.
not even necessarily around alcohol, but around how to manage life. Because I've had to grow up and learn all the skills to manage life now that I can't just turn to booze anymore. So because I've learned all those skills, I've now got them to teach my kids, which is
Yeah.
so powerful. My daughter's had a really rough time starting high school, and drinking Sarah wouldn't have had a clue how to deal with it. Whereas sober Sarah has got so many tools and so many things that I'm able to share with her. As a result, we're so close, and I'm able to really support her through this, whereas it just wouldn't have been the same if I was drinking.
No,
So
because you'd be thinking back to when you were in that situation, and what did you do? You went out and got wasted with your friends, and that created a
totally,
bond, and you don't want to do
yeah,
that.
no, exactly. So that would be my second one. Probably my third one would be the return of that zest for life that just got
Yeah.
totally obliterated with alcohol. And with that zest for life just comes such a feeling of potential. I remember describing it to someone as just having this fizzle of potential in my tummy, because there's nothing holding me back now. I'm a
Yeah.
yes person. I say yes to doing things. I'm trying new things all the time. My life has become so much more interesting and rich and diverse and full because I'm embracing new opportunities that drinking Sarah would have probably just turned her nose up at, because they would have just taken her away from her drink. And so
Yeah.
that's been really
Absolutely.
wonderful as well.
Fantastic. Yeah, we get our energy and creativity back, don't we? I think alcohol steals that from us, because it might give us a little lift for a couple of hours, but then we slump again. When I think about how I used to get home from work, have a couple of glasses of wine on the sofa, and then all I wanted to do was watch some rubbish on Netflix. I didn't want to do
Yeah.
anything, go anywhere, see anybody. So it gives us energy to start exploring and discover what we really want to do. Sometimes I talk to people in our community that are quite new, and they've managed to give up drinking for a while, and they say, oh, I'm so bored, I don't know what to do. And I say, you need a hobby. Obviously you need to find something. What do you enjoy doing apart from drinking? They say, I don't know, because I spend all
Yeah.
my spare time drinking with my friends.
Yeah.
That's what I do. I say, maybe go back to what you used to enjoy as a child, because that can be a nice clue, or get some coaching. So let's talk about your coaching. You're a grey area coach, aren't you? You did that thing with Jolene Park. Tell us about that one.
Yeah. So grey area drinking looks at people who are drinking in that middle level, like I was, right? So when I wasn't at that, what I would call end stage physical dependency, I didn't need to have medical support to withdraw from alcohol. I was drinking at a level that was dysfunctional for me, but I wasn't physically dependent where I needed to drink every day. I learned with Jolene A lot of the physiology, a lot about how alcohol impacts the brain and how it depletes our neurotransmitters. So one of the ways that we can really support reducing our cravings for alcohol when we get sober is to work on replenishing neurotransmitters. And I do that with my clients, as well as doing that deep self-discovery work. Like you say, I will say to my clients, what do you love doing outside of drinking? So many just look at me with tears in their eyes and say, I've got no idea, I don't know. And I relate to that because nor did I. And I just love it. I'm sure you do as well, just going on that journey with clients of that experimentation and fun and getting to try. What do I want to add in? What might I want to try this week? Actually seeing it as a positive and a fun experience to start experimenting with
and they go on to do the most amazing things, don't they? We had a lady that's run across the Kalahari Desert. I mean, that's a contrast from sitting on the sofa, isn't it?
I know. That's just the beauty, isn't it? When you hear these stories, I've got clients who've gone back to horse riding and setting up businesses and doing degrees, and they're just following dreams that otherwise they thought were impossible.
Yeah. It's amazing. So imagine someone's listening to this, Sarah, and they're like we were when we were drinking a lot and in denial. They're beginning to accept that they've got to make a change, but it just seems so overwhelming. They don't know where to start. So what would you say to them?
I say at the start, get clear on your why. Just really get clear on why you want to make this change. It doesn't have to be about saying forever, because I could never have said forever at the start. Commit to 30 days. Give yourself the chance. See it as an experiment of you. You're just doing this opportunity to get some data. How do I sleep when I'm not drinking? What's my mood like? What's my energy like? What are my relationships like? What's my physical health like? What's my performance like? See it as me experiment of what's me like without booze. And then we've got data, and then we've got information, and then we can start to make informed choices of, well, which version of me do I like better? Is it the version that's drinking and hungover and tired all the time? Or is it the version of me that's jumping out of bed in the morning to do a 5 a.m. gym class and has got loads of energy and is more connected to the kids and things like that? So I always say, just start off with seeing it as an experiment. Don't think beyond that. Then immerse yourself in the resources, the tools, the sober community. I've just written a book called Beyond Booze, How to Create a Life You Love Alcohol-Free. And that's a book that focuses on what do we add in when we take alcohol out. It's not a book about how to get sober. It's a book about how to stay sober. It's a book about what it takes to create a really great life so that you don't ever feel like you're missing out by not drinking. Because that's the heart of this work, right? I think many of us can take a break and do 30 days, but the actual staying sober with a life you love without alcohol, that's the work. And that's what I saw that so many women were struggling with, which was why I wrote this book.
Yeah, because it's no good being sober if we're miserable, is it? We have to learn to thrive and get the most out of our lives. So where can people find your book? It was great, Sarah. I read it. You kindly sent me a copy. But where can people buy it?
So in the UK, it's in Amazon and Waterstones. If you're in the US, it's Amazon. If you're in Australia and New Zealand, it's in all the big stores. And then, of course, on Amazon as well.
Talk to us about your community. So you do this coaching and you have a community as well, I think, because I was at your summit that you did recently. Talk to us about all that.
Yeah, so I have a free Facebook community called the Women's Wellbeing Collective, and that's just a free space for people to come and just be immersed in a community of like-minded women. Then 4 times a year, I run alcohol-free 30-day programs where I support women, and you kindly came in and shared all your knowledge and wisdom with the ladies in the January program, which was just fantastic. I just think there's so much power in communities with the work that you do, that when you bring women together to feel less alone, it makes so much difference.
Yeah, because we think that there's something wrong with us, don't we, when we get into this fix? And it's so tempting to isolate, like you were doing when you first got to Australia. Once we meet other people and we realise we're not alone in this, and it's not our fault that we've been plied with this addictive substance since we were teenagers, and some of us are going to get addicted. It's as simple as that. So what's your website?
It's just my name, sarahrusbach.com.
Okay, I'll put it in the show notes. So anything we haven't covered, Sarah, that you think we should mention?
No, just that if you're struggling, if you're listening to this and maybe you've been on this journey for a while and taking breaks and going back to drinking and taking breaks and going back to drinking, just know that many of us have been there in that same
Absolutely.
path. And sometimes it's part of the process. So it's about being kind to yourself as well. Just immerse yourself in the community, in the sober world, because I think that is what makes the difference.
Yeah, I love your tip about collecting data, because we need to be curious, don't we, rather than harsh on ourselves. Just let's find out what's going on. Be a scientist in our own life, be the observer. Then we collect so much conclusive data, it's not doing us any good, that we'll feel more like making a change.
Exactly. I think the thing for women is so many women I work with, and I don't know if you're the same, they think it's their fault. They think there's something wrong with them. Why can't I control my drinking?
Yeah,
Why can't
I did
moderate?
too.
Yeah, it's not our fault. It's highly addictive in a society that tells us it's expected every step of the way, and that we should be using it as a reward, as self-care, to relax, to switch off, to celebrate. And so if we can't moderate an addictive substance, that is not on us, that is on the substance. I think it's really important that we keep sharing this message so that less women are sitting in silence thinking they've got to try harder. It's my fault. I'm a loser. I would wake up every day and I wouldn't even be able to look myself in the mirror because I was so disgusted with myself for breaking my own promises again. And I said I wasn't going to drink and I had another bottle. And you just live in this perpetuating cycle of negative self-talk, and it just ruins you, and it's not a way to live. And so there's so many opportunities out there once we remove alcohol, and it's not easy, but staying drinking is not easy either. So it's just remembering. For anyone listening, go and get a copy of my book, which is full of so many tools and resources as well, and lean into the communities that are out there, because connection is so important in this journey.